Have you ever wondered why some women don't just walk away? They disappear. Not out of fear or retreat, but out of revelation. Why some women, once shattered, don't return softer, but colder, deeper, wiser. And why the men who once overlooked them now dream of them, ache for them, and feel the sting of a presence that no longer belongs to them. This is not the story of a woman who simply heals. It is the story of a woman who integrates, who does the forbidden. She turns toward her own darkness. She dares to look into the mirror of her shadow and does not flinch. She no longer runs from the parts of herself that were once shamed, silenced, or punished. And in that radical self-acceptance, something terrifying happens. She becomes untouchable. Not because she builds walls, but because she tears down illusions. This woman has stopped negotiating her worth with the external world. She no longer needs the mirror of a man to tell her who she is. She doesn't seduce with performance, nor plead for attention with pretty packaging. She has become something far more powerful than pretty. She has become whole, and wholeness, to the fractured ego of a man, is the most dangerous kind of beauty. She has embraced the part of her that once begged to be chosen, the little girl who waited, silently, hoping someone would see her pain and stay. But instead of trying to heal her by feeding her more breadcrumbs, she took that inner child by the hand, walked her back into the past, and told her the truth. You were never unworthy. You were simply surrounded by people who could not meet you in your depth. This woman no longer needs closure. She doesn't text to explain. She doesn't seek apologies. Because she has learned that clarity does not always come from others. Sometimes it arrives in silence, like thunder beneath the skin. She has become the kind of silence that men don't recover from. Not because she plays games, but because her absence is not a tactic, it's a symptom of evolution. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the unconscious repressed aspects of ourselves we exile into the dark. For women, much of this shadow has been formed by centuries of emotional muting, suppression of instinct, and punishment of power. The good girl, the people pleaser, the emotional caretaker. She was taught to hide her anger, her sexuality, her madness, her intuition. But the moment she reclaims them, not to act them out, but to own them, she changes the vibration of every room she enters. You may feel her before she speaks. Her energy doesn't beg, it commands. Not with force, but with presence. She is the woman you can't quite explain, the one you thought you could toy with, until she looked at you without flinching. Until you realized her silence wasn't passive, it was decisive. She's not heartless. In fact, her heart is vast. But it's no longer a place for squatters. It's no longer a sanctuary for broken men looking for a mother or a mirror. She doesn't confuse nurturing with self-abandonment. She doesn't offer softness as a currency. She loves from a place of fullness now, not emptiness. And that love is rare, sacred, costly. The woman who has embraced her shadow becomes magnetic, not because she tries, but because she's real. She is the reflection of what every man secretly fears and desires. A woman he cannot control. A woman who sees through performance. A woman who no longer craves to be loved more than she craves to be herself. When she was naive, she called it chemistry. Now she calls it trauma bonds. When she was desperate, she called it fate. Now she calls it projection. She has learned to watch instead of fall, to observe her own hunger for validation without feeding it. And you, if you are listening to this, if you are aching in the in-between of your own transformation, hear this. You do not become untouchable by rejecting love. You become untouchable by rejecting self-betrayal. You become untouchable when you no longer abandon yourself to be chosen, when you'd rather be alone than tolerated, when your silence is not a punishment, but a prayer, when your detachment is not a mask, but a mirror. And when a man looks into that mirror, he will either rise or recoil. She does not speak loudly, yet her presence roars. She is not decorated in dramatics or desperate gestures. She no longer seeks to be the most beautiful in the room, only the most rooted. And because of that, she becomes unforgettable in a way that goes far beyond appearances. This woman is not here to prove her worth. She embodies it. She is not waiting for permission to feel whole. And when a man meets her, something ancient stirs within him. Not just desire, but a confrontation. She is the threshold, the test, the trigger. She reflects back to him every part he has not yet made peace with in himself. She becomes a mirror of the feminine divine, not in softness alone, but in her sovereignty. And for the man who is not yet whole, who still confuses possession with love or validation with power, she is terrifying. He may want her body, but cannot reach her spirit. He may chase her, obsess over her, try to decode her silence. But she remains untamed, because she knows something most women never dare to admit. Not every man deserves your vulnerability. Not every hand deserves your softness. Not every gaze deserves your soul. This woman has walked through fire. Not once, but many times. She has burned off identities that were built to please, to survive, to stay small. She has mourned who she used to be, and now she lives not to be liked, but to be liberated. Men feel this in her, even those who don't understand it, especially those. There's a calm in her that unsettles them, because it cannot be bought, seduced, or manipulated. It is the calm of a woman who has buried illusions, the calm of someone who has sat with her rage, caressed her loneliness, and held her inner chaos like a mother holds a fevered child, with fierce compassion. She no longer hides her shadow. She dances with it. The anger she once swallowed now guides her boundaries. The shame she once carried now speaks as her intuition. The fear she once obeyed now bows before her courage. And when she moves through the world, she does not ask for safety. She becomes it. Not because she's hardened, but because she's whole. Wholeness is the most erotic thing in the universe. It does not beg. It does not cling. It does not manipulate. To the uninitiated man, this is unbearable. He will wonder why she doesn't respond the way others did. He will try the old tricks, the breadcrumb attention, the hot and cold routine, the game of dominance. But she doesn't play anymore. Not because she's cold, but because she's awake. She knows now. The chase was never about love. The chaos was never chemistry. The pain was never passion. It was the echo of her unhealed self trying to earn what was never freely given. Now she no longer seeks to be understood. She seeks to be at peace. She no longer performs for the male gaze. She aligns with her own, and that alignment is felt by everyone around her. Friends, lovers, strangers, even enemies. Her energy carries a silent decree: enter respectfully or not at all. This isn't arrogance. This is clarity. This is the result of shadow work, of confronting the inner saboteur, the codependent patterns, the ancestral wounds passed down like curses dressed as duty. She has named them, grieved them, released them, and now her love is not a transaction, it's a gift, a choice, a sacred act of conscious presence, but only for those who can meet her there, in depth, in honesty, in growth. Anything less evaporates at the edge of her aura. So if you're watching her from a distance now, wondering how she became so unreachable, it's not because she built walls, it's because you stopped growing when she started awakening. She doesn't hold it against you. She's too far gone for bitterness. She simply chooses her peace over the promise of potential. She chooses her healing over your confusion. She chooses herself. And that is what makes her untouchable. She is no longer addicted to being seen. That was her old self, the one who twisted herself into perfection, hoping to earn a love that would never abandon her. The one who confused attention for affection and passion for presence. That woman died, not suddenly but slowly, with every disappointment, every betrayal, every night she cried in silence and pretended to be fine. That was her funeral, though no one noticed. In her place, a new being emerged. Not hardened, hallowed, not bitter, boundaried. She learned that being good doesn't keep you safe, and being pleasing doesn't guarantee love. She learned that no matter how much she gave, it would never be enough for someone who was empty. And so, she stopped overgiving. She stopped shrinking. She stopped reaching. Now, she doesn't need to be chosen. She chooses. And what she chooses now is herself. This woman no longer apologizes for her standards. She no longer waters herself down to keep from intimidating the insecure. She no longer entertains conversations that cost her peace. There is a quality to her solitude now, not lonely, but luminous. It feeds her, fills her, restores her to the rhythm of her own soul. Men feel the shift in her energy. The ones who once fed on her doubt now feel her detachment like a blade. She no longer asks what's wrong. She no longer waits for them to figure it out. Her silence is not an invitation to chase. It is a requiem for the version of herself who once believed she had to suffer to be loved. And yet, the strange paradox of this transformation is that the more she pulls inward, the more magnetic she becomes. The less she explains, the more they wonder. The less she reveals, the more they ache to understand. She becomes a question they cannot answer, a memory that won't let go, a presence that lingers long after her absence. Because the feminine mystique is not about seduction, it is about sovereignty. When a woman reclaims her darkness and integrates her light, she doesn't become cold. She becomes clear. Clear in what she allows, clear in what she desires, clear in what she will never again accept. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate." She has taken this to heart, no longer mistaking her trauma for destiny, no longer reenacting old wounds in new lovers. She no longer dates from her emptiness, but from her essence. She no longer bonds over brokenness. She builds from wholeness. And here's what few will admit. That kind of woman scares men. Not because she's mean, not because she's cruel, but because she cannot be manipulated. She cannot be coerced into giving more than she receives. She cannot be shamed into silence or seduced into surrender. Her love, once freely given, is now earned. She doesn't punish with detachment. She simply moves in alignment. If a man cannot meet her where she is, she doesn't lower herself. She lets go. If his ego demands more than his heart is willing to give, she doesn't argue. She disappears. This is her shadow at work, not in destruction, but in discernment. She is no longer afraid to walk away, no longer afraid to be misunderstood, because she has sat with herself long enough to know, I would rather be alone in truth than adored in illusion. And so she moves through life like a storm disguised as serenity. Her presence commands respect, not because she demands it, but because she has become it. She embodies the very thing that once terrified her, being too much, too intense, too deep, too emotional. Now she wears those words like armor, because she knows that anything too much for someone who isn't enough for her is simply divine proportion. She has nothing to prove anymore. She doesn't chase, she doesn't convince, she doesn't wait, because now she understands. If love requires the dimming of her light, it isn't love. If connection means betraying her instincts, it isn't sacred. If desire comes wrapped in disrespect, it isn't worth her time. She moves not out of spite, but out of sacred preservation. She trusts the whispers of her intuition more than the promises of potential. She trusts the silence between words more than the words themselves. And if you ask her why she seems untouchable now, why her energy has become something no man can possess, she might smile, she might say nothing, or she might look you in the eyes and tell you the truth, because I stopped abandoning myself. There's something haunting about a woman who no longer flinches, who no longer leans in when someone pulls away, who no longer mirrors chaos just to keep someone close. She doesn't react the way she used to. because she's seen too much, felt too deep, and come too far. She's not playing at strength. Her silence is not a strategy. Her absence is not a move on the chessboard of attraction. It's simply what happens when a woman has finally come home to herself. The version of her that once obsessed over unanswered texts, cryptic behaviors, and mixed signals is gone. She buried that self with ceremony. She no longer makes excuses for emotional unavailability. She doesn't hold space for confusion disguised as mystery. She doesn't decode the riddles of men who don't know who they are. She doesn't need the noise anymore. She's tuned into something older, quieter, and more sacred. The voice inside, the one she ignored for years, drowning it in fantasy, in the addiction of being wanted, in the illusion of being chosen. That voice speaks clearly now, and it says, "You are the one you've been waiting for." She has become fluent in her own silence. She no longer fears solitude, she worships in it. She doesn't chase highs, she sits with her lows. She doesn't demand answers from others, she listens inward. This is the result of integration, the sacred alchemy of shadow and soul. She is not light alone. She is dusk and dawn, flame and ash, lover and storm. She has made peace with her inner contradictions. She no longer tries to be easy to love, because the truth is, she's not. She is complex, she is layered, she is tender in places you may never reach and fierce in ways you'll never tame. She doesn't need you to understand her, she needs you to respect her. And if you can't, she'll walk. No threat, no drama, just stillness. The feminine mystic isn't the woman who dresses her wounds in lace and lipstick. She's the one who walks with them exposed, unashamed. She knows that her scars do not stain her, they anoint her. She has learned the art of transmutation. She doesn't escape her pain, she metabolizes it, turns it into power, into discernment, into grace. And that grace isn't sweet, it's holy, it's hard-earned. It's the grace of a woman who no longer betrays herself to be loved. When you meet her, you will feel it in your bones. Not because she demands attention, but because your nervous system will recognize something ancient. A stillness, a sovereignty, a signal that says you cannot enter here unless you have been initiated. And the initiation she speaks of isn't about status, it's about depth, about honesty, about whether you've met your own shadow and lived to tell the truth. Because she will not hold space for your illusions. She will not be your sanctuary if you come with false gods. She has burned her own altars before, and she will not kneel again. This woman has stopped measuring her worth by how much she is desired. Desire means nothing to her now, unless it is rooted in presence, in devotion, in depth. She is not interested in chemistry without consciousness, in attention without intention, in attraction without alignment. Her sensuality no longer begs to be witnessed. It moves like breath. Natural, unforced, uncontainable. She doesn't seduce, she simply is. And in her being, she disrupts, she awakens, she dismantles every illusion of control that fragile egos cling to. She is no longer interested in being understood by the world. She is interested in becoming true to herself. And in doing so, she has entered the realm of the untouchable. Not because she is closed, but because she is consecrated. To be loved by her now is to be chosen by someone who has chosen herself first. And that is the rarest kind of love. Not a love that saves you, not a love that completes you, but a love that meets you, wholly, in truth. A love you can only receive if you have dared to meet your own soul in the dark. She has, and because of that, she is no longer available for the ordinary. She no longer waits to be claimed. She is the claim. She no longer views love as a prize to be won or a role to be performed. It is no longer a battlefield where she proves her worth, nor a script where she recites the lines expected of her. Love to her now is sacred, not scarce. It must be mutual, or it must be absent. She is not afraid of absence anymore. She has lived in it, danced with it. She has known the ache of being unseen, unheard, untouched, even while lying beside someone who claimed to love her. And in that quiet suffering, she awakened. She realized that to be alone in truth is far more holy than to be together in pretense. So now she leaves without slamming doors. She walks away without rage. Her back turned is more powerful than any scream, because it's not about punishment, it's about protection. Her own. And yes, she will be misunderstood. They'll say she's too distant, too cold, too hard to read. But only by those who have never taken the time to learn her language, the language of energy, of presence, of integrity. She no longer speaks in code or cries for breadcrumbs. She speaks clearly now, or not at all. She lets the silence speak for her. And that silence, it echoes in the hearts of the men who lost her, in the minds of those who underestimated her, in the souls of those who tried to touch her without truly seeing her. Because once you've touched a woman who has embraced her shadow, once you've looked into her eyes and seen that there's no need in them, only knowing, once you've felt her presence and realized it's not clinging, but choosing, you never forget her. She becomes the axis around which your own unconscious begins to turn. She doesn't try to change you. She doesn't try to fix or mold you. She reflects you. And that reflection will either awaken you or destroy your illusions. For she no longer sees through the lens of fantasy. The veils have lifted. She sees your patterns, your games, your fear of intimacy cloaked in charm. And still, she does not condemn you. But she does walk away, because she has done her work. She has faced her own ego. She has held herself in the loneliness you still try to escape. She is no longer playing in the shallow end of love. She wants the ocean, or nothing. And because of that, she no longer fights to stay in a connection where her depth is not matched. She doesn't chase, not because she's playing hard to get, but because she is remembered. She is the mountain, the flame, the altar. Come with reverence, or don't come at all. There is no more people-pleasing in her. That part of her died with the realization that some people will drain you dry and still say you never gave enough. That no matter how soft she made herself, it would never fill the void in someone who hadn't yet faced their own reflection. Now she protects her peace like a sacred garden. She chooses who enters. She watches how they water her. She knows what it costs to be generous with those who only take. And so she no longer gives from guilt or fear, only from overflow. Her love now is not transactional. It is transformational. It doesn't whisper, "Please choose me." It declares, "I have already chosen myself. If you wish to meet me, rise." The men who once played with her heart now feel her distance like a winter wind, sharp, silent, and irreversible. And in that distance, they realize she was not dramatic, she was divine. She wasn't too much, she was the mirror of everything they weren't ready to face. And you, listening to this, may be standing at the edge of your own becoming. You may feel the stirrings of rage, grief, loneliness, all calling you inward. Let them go in. You are not broken. You are awakening. You are not losing love. You are releasing illusion. You are not too much. You are finally touching the truth of who you are. There is nothing more dangerous to a world built on female compliance than a woman who is no longer afraid of her own power. So if you feel that fire in your chest, that grief rising like a wave, that voice whispering no more, listen to it. That is the beginning. That is you coming home. That is the birth of the untouchable woman within you. She walks differently now. Not faster, not louder, but with the rhythm of someone who is no longer trying to arrive, because she is the destination. There is no performance in her presence, no hunger for approval in her smile. The softness is still there, but it no longer apologizes for the steel beneath it. She is the woman who sits at the edge of every man's memory, not because of what she gave, but because of what she refused to surrender, her selfhood. This woman, born of heartbreak and shadow, does not see love as rescue. She does not hand over her power like an offering in exchange for attention. Her worth is no longer on trial in the court of someone else's gaze. She knows now, validation earned through performance is a contract with self-erasure. So she writes her own contract, one where her body is not a battlefield for unprocessed projections. One where her silence is not an absence but a boundary. One where her love is no longer a sacrifice but a sanctuary. When she gives now, it is with intention. When she loves, it is without losing herself. When she leaves, it is without regret. She has watched men unravel in her silence, watched them reach out when her energy slipped through their fingers. But what they don't understand is that her leaving is never sudden. Her soul just stopped blooming in their presence, long before her body followed. She no longer believes in fixing broken dynamics with more effort. She no longer tries to make chaos feel like home. She has retired from being the emotional nursemaid to those who refuse to heal. Because her love is no longer a lifeline, it is a mirror. And not everyone can stand what they see. She is now a keeper of her own time, her own rituals, her own inner life. She no longer chases depth in others, she becomes the depth. She no longer waits to be chosen. She honors her own choosing, and in that sovereign state she becomes what many fear and few understand. A woman who cannot be conquered. She is not untouchable because she is unavailable. She is untouchable because she is unshakable. No longer reactive, no longer reaching, no longer rushing into places where her soul withers. She does not need you to desire her, she needs you to deserve her, to approach with humility, with clarity, with reverence. Not because she demands worship, but because she has worshipped herself back into wholeness. She has stopped waiting for the world to meet her in the places she kept buried. She unearthed them herself, sat with them, bled for them, healed them. And now when you touch her, you touch every version of her that died to become this one. And there is no going back. There is no returning to the girl who once begged, who once bent, who once broke herself just to be enough. She no longer competes in the marketplace of performative femininity. She no longer needs to be the most desired, only the most authentic. Her life is not an audition. It is a reclamation. And the final stage of her transformation is not louder. It's quieter, not more visible, but more vital. She no longer exists to be seen. She exists to see, to sense, to choose with the kind of wisdom only earned through initiation. This is her liberation, not in becoming someone else, but in returning to herself. The self she buried beneath shame, survival, and the soft lies she was told about what a woman should be. And now she is free. Free from the need to be desired to feel worthy. Free from the illusion that love must be earned through pain. Free from the contracts she once signed with silence and self-sacrifice. She knows what she offers. She knows what she holds. She knows that her presence is a gift, not a prize. And those who cannot receive it will never touch it again. The woman who has embraced her 5 shadows, her rage, her desire, her madness, her grief, her wild instinct, she has not destroyed herself, she is resurrected. And in doing so, she has become untouchable, not because she resists love, but because she has become it. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.